Hello everybody, Floppy Waffles 69 here, and welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to be looking at the Tier 8 tech line destroyer to this alternative branch. This is the Tier 8 Osborne. And yes, before you take the words out of my mouth, this is continuing our down the line series going down towards the Burrows, which is the alternative DD line for the Americans. Obviously, it's been quite a bit since I've released a video. It's been about, 5 or 6 days since I released my Hughes video on the Down the Line series. Sorry about that. I've been out of town for a little bit, so I obviously didn't bring my computer and my stuff. So now I have it. So now I can get back, and I'm right back at making videos for you fine ladies and gentlemen. So anyways, continuing our Down the Line series, we've already established kind of like what this line does and what this line is good at. But now we take our first big leap in the line. And this is basically, there's first of 2 big leaps, the next one coming into the Christopher ship at Tier 9. But here at Tier 8, we have now taken our first big leap from the Hughes, and that is picking up these 137mm main battery guns. Right here, you see right here, these 137s. And this is going to translate to a lot higher damage per shot and volley, which is quite nice, right? Kind of solidifying what these ships do, which are glorified damage farmers. Obviously, the big highlight on this line, there are 2 of them. You have the semi-armor piercing rounds on these 137mm guns, and you have this time-based consumable of smokescreen, which is super nice as well. It's very flexible, allows you to smoke up and disengage when you want to, and farm for a little bit while you keep moving if not. And also, if you continue to go at a quarter speed, it also acts like a crawling smoke generator that we see on like the Commonwealth, for example, which is very nice too, allowing you to be very flexible. The only thing that this smoke isn't is a good team-oriented smoke screen. Unless your teammates are right next to you, or you park right next to your teammates, it's really not going to do too much for them because smoke doesn't really last too long itself. But it does dispense out every 5 or 6 seconds it puffs out with a new smoke screen that lasts around 15 seconds, if that or less. So again, not really team-oriented here. This is more of an individual smoke screen for you to utilize, to disengage, and or farm from. But like we always do in these little ship review, guys, we talk a little bit about her, and then we're going to go dig around under the hood here and then go ahead and show some gameplay in the Osborne. So I'll be honest with you, I really like the Osborne. I think this is a very, very fun ship here at Tier 8, which again is pretty competitive for destroyers. I think this ship is right there with the likes of a lot of them. Especially in a competitive scene, a asymmetric and co-op scene, and of course our random battle scene as well. This is a great all-around destroyer. But one thing that this destroyer is not is a torpedo boat. Given the fact that we only have 1 torpedo launcher and it is center mounted, that should be pretty much telling you, hey, this ship is not made to be acted from stealth and launching torpedo strikes like the Kid, for example, kind of telling you the same thing. This is definitely a gun boat, a full-fledged gun boat. So you definitely, if you're not a big fan of the gun shooty kind of play style for destroyers, then this might not be the line for you. Okay. Looking at the armor layout to begin with, again, this is very standard, pretty self-explanatory. There's no major changes to the armor scheme. This is your standard Tier 8 destroyer armor scheme for destroyers. Moving on into the survivability, we're clocking in at 17,800, which is right there in the middle of the pack, which again is super nice. It's always nice on gunboat DDs to have a little bit more HP, so you have more wiggle room to use from, right? Again, going into the artillery, this is the 4x1 137s, reloading in about 3.2 seconds. 180-degree turn time is 14.4. And again, your maximum range is 12.5 kilometers. Again, I mentioned this in the Hughes video. I really don't think here on the Osborne either you need to take that advanced firing training skill or whatever it's called. You know what I'm talking about. The one that extends your main battery range by 15 or 20%. I don't think you need that on this thing. I think 12.5 kilometers is more than enough, especially with these shell arcs. You really don't need to extend that range at all. And I think this ship operates better from medium to closer ranges anyways. Moving into the high explosive shells, obviously all this ship has, just like the predecessor in the Hughes, is it only has HE and semi-armor piercing. No armor piercing here. And this HE is going to do around 19,500 damage with an 8% fire chance, and can go ahead and penetrate 23 millimeters of armor, which again is really nice because it's more so than actual like your 127 millimeter DDs that usually are only penning around 21 millimeters, maybe 22, right? So it is nice to have an extra little millimeter of penetration, but it's not really going to change much, right, in the grand scheme of things, with armor schemes or anything. And it's not crossing any notable thresholds, is what I'm trying to say. Obviously, though, your initial velocity on your shells are much nicer on the Osborne. You're getting more, I don't want to say laser beams, but compared to what you had on the Hughes, a little less floaty, right? You're going into the 823 now instead of like the 792, I believe, which was previous. So that's always a big plus. It means you don't have to lead your targets as much, and you can more reliably land your shells from greater distances. Again, going to the semi-armor piercing. Again, I already mentioned kind of how semi-armor piercing works. There's just a brief description about it. If you want to know more about it, there are plenty of videos out there on YouTube that will illustrate to you how semi-armor piercing shells work in the game. Again, maximum damage is 3,000. You can go ahead and penetrate 38 millimeters of effective armor. And again, it is matching that of the high explosive at 823 meters a second coming out of the barrels, right? Torpedoes, you have the 1x4 launcher right here, the 533. Again, this is going to go a distance of 9 kilometers, which is a little bit less, 200 meters less than the Hughes. The Hughes, I believe, picked up 9.2 and a considerable stronger torpedo armament, as it had two, quad launchers. Now you only have one quad launcher. It reloads in 75 seconds, and does a maximum damage around 15,500 with the 60 knots with 1.4 kilometers is the detectability range on these torpedoes. That's going to give the reaction time of around 8.7 seconds for the enemy ship to see these torpedoes coming. And again, that's excluding submarines going to be able to spot those other destroyers, hydroacoustic search, that sort of stuff. The ship does have depth charges, really not worth talking about, though they are American and they do a lot of damage at 5,100. 2 drops of 12 bombs in the charge. A reload time about 40 seconds. Pretty standard stuff, right? AA defense. It's not terrible. I do find myself shooting down a couple of planes. Again, this is going to be more for the occasional chip damage to aircraft carriers. You're really not going to be shredding planes by any means. So keep that in mind as well. If you really want to shred planes and you want to be an American DD, the Kid is a much better option as it has defensive fire plus a really good AA suite. But one thing I forgot to mention is the hull. Actually, it's a Fletcher class hull, which is always a very welcome addition. It's an excellent hull in this game, operates very, very well. Again, though, you don't have the 5 turrets, you only have the 4, but you pick up a little bit, more AA suites here on the back. A is good, but it's not great. That's kind of how I'd sum it up, guys. Moving into the maneuverability, and this is where you start to see that thing I talked about in the first video, where you see like balancing features. 35 knots top speed with that turning circle radius. Now we've jumped up to 630 with a rudder shift time of 4.1 seconds. You are a little bit on the sluggish side. It's going to happen. It's a balancing feature given the fact that you have a lot of firepower with these guns and this hull. So just keep that in mind, that you're going to have to pre-plan your maneuvers and make sure that you're finding yourself in situations that is going to mitigate the potential likelihood of hitting a random torpedo that is going to be shot your way. That's kind of the main reason. You always want to be moving in your smoke screen. And I did mention that if you are reversing with that plus 10% speed boost that the ship line has, if you're going a quarter speed or more, make sure you go a quarter, like 2 seconds, and then go forward or stop, because you will actually fly out of your smoke screen before it's puffed out and it fades, and you will be spotted for a brief second or two. So keep that in mind as well. And then finally, going into the concealment here on the vessel, I believe your standard concealment is clocking in around 7.6 kilometers. And then with the concealment skill on the ship, you can go ahead and get it down to like 6.4, I want to say, which is pretty nice, given the fact that this is what your upgrade scheme is looking like here. Again, I will showcase this again when we go to the live battle or the gameplay review of the vessel, but this is what I take for my upgrades. Again, very self-explanatory. This number 2 slot with the engine boost modification that gives you a plus 30%. It's not mandatory. It's just something that I utilize on the ship. By all means, if you don't want to do that and spend the coal, then I think engine room protection is probably your best bet. But for me, I think a big strength of these ships actually is this speed boost when it's active and get to and from, disengage, re-engage, hunt down enemy ships. It's just nice having that, and I want to make sure it stays up 30% longer is what I'm looking for there. And I do that all the way up now to the burrows. So you're going to see that I'm taking this kind of loadout in all my ships. Given the fact that we don't have access to the 6 slot, which again, the 6 slot for the Christopher and the Burrows, I'm going ahead and taking the reload mod. It's just something I do to get, more DPM. That's how I play these ships, and so far I found them truly and really effective. But anyways, guys, that basically is the Osborne in a nutshell. I think we should stop talking about her in the port screen, and let's go ahead and look at her in battle, shall we? Alrighty, guys, and here we are in battle with the Tier 8 American Alternative Destroyer. This is the Osborne. We are in, what is this, like Land of Fire map, and I am playing with my good buddy Eagle here. Again, the division really didn't make too much of a difference, but I always want to make sure I point out that I am showcasing replays here and there with division mates, which can or may alter the way the ship is played, but generally I don't think it's changing too much given the fact about how he has played in this battle and what has presented itself to me in this battle. Obviously, this was a very, very good battle. I do not survive this battle. That's a little bit of a spoiler, but again, I think it's highlighting everything that you need to know about this ship and what makes it good. I think we are top tier, if I'm not mistaken. We are in a tier 8 battle with tier 6, 7s, and 8s. Again, though, going back to what I'm saying, it does highlight a lot of the strengths, and it does showcase some of the weaknesses too that this ship does have, which again is something that I want to make sure I highlight on this channel a lot. I find like a lot of alternative YouTubers always want to showcase the positives, the phenomenals of the ship and what it can do and how it's so great, and then they sell you on a ship, and then you go ahead and buy or play the ship, and your experience is nothing to what they have. So always take these reviews with a pinch of salt, and when you watch them. And that's what I kind of try to do on my channels. I try to showcase maybe like what the average World of Warship player could achieve by chance. You know what I mean? Like, I do consider myself a good player, but I'm not going to go out there on a limb and say, I'm anything phenomenal, right? It's just something that you guys can do. And hopefully that these reviews hit home hard enough for you guys that you can go out there and pick up, your Osborne, your Burrows line, and you can have a fun time in her. Or if you haven't tried it yet, maybe it'll sell you on going down this line. One thing that I think really people try to make a comparison to is like the Sherman, and I think it's not a bad comparison. I think the Sherman has its own little quirks and gimmicks compared to the Burrows, but I think it's a good predecessor of what you're going to be getting, good example, good comparison of what you potentially are going to be getting yourself into when you go down this line, right? Obviously based upon where I have seen ships go and what the spawns have been, that's why I'm being a little bit more aggressive in the beginning of this battle. You're going to see myself here, for example, if this DD didn't just change and start to alter and open back up, I probably would have switched to HE there. And again, that's something that I talked about the last video about understanding when to utilize semi-armor piercing and when to switch to HE. And that would have been a scenario to switch to HE on. But as long as they're showing me a decently good profile like this Duchefal here is, then I'm going to keep the semi-armor piercing because it's going to full pen the guy and it's going to do a catastrophic amount of damage, which you see right there, which are Hughes is able to take advantage and be aggressive there and eliminate their Duchefal, which is always nice. Obviously here, this is like the ship smash whatever, which is essentially a Fen Yang, which I know his torpedoes physically can't hit me, so I'm not really too worried with sitting in my smoke screen, but I do want to take the fight to him. I know that he's more of an AP only focused ship. His HE is going to have a hard time with his 100mm guns penetrating my 21mm or whatever 19mm effective armor, so I'm going to go ahead and pick the fight. That's what these ships like to do. They really like to bully other enemy destroyers and or enemy cruisers if they're not focused on you. I would say you want to bully enemy cruisers and battleships inside of your smoke screen, whereas if you're fighting enemy destroyers, you can pretty much take the fight to them. You do have to be careful though. Some really, really good destroyer players might try to bait you in going broadside to get all your firepower online while they launch torpedoes where you'd be turning out to you and absolutely obliterate you, because that's their only safe haven that they have. So you're going to have to be careful when you're fighting those enemy torpedo ships, because they will inevitably do a maneuver like that and potentially send you port back quickly. A lot of other DDs in this game are going to fail in comparison to your main battery, so it's a big positive for you, and you make sure you're going to want to utilize your main battery to win these in prolonged engagement. You don't want to prolong the engagements too long is what I'm trying to say. Obviously here an enemy battleship is going nose into me, and I know my semi-armor piercing is only going to really reliably be able to chunk superstructure, which is already sort of saturated. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to the high explosive and set as many fires as possible and just do a little bit of chip damage plus damage over time with the fires being set, and we're hopefully going to be able to nuke this guy. I know it sucks here in the game because I remember the previous video I said the one big thing that differentiates a good player in this line via not so good player in this line is the utilization and time management of their smoke screens. And here we are basically within the first 5 minutes of the battle, and I've basically utilized all my smoke screen. But if you look back at what I had to do in the engagements I picked or whatever, or where I'm at, I physically had to utilize all that smoke. So again, you want to make sure you manage your smoke screen well, but if you find yourself in these situations where you could theoretically kill, including the douche fault, 3 enemy ships for just your 1 ship, I'd say that's more than enough of a trade and really worth it. But now I'm gonna have to play a little bit more smarter, a little bit more passive, pick my engagements a little bit more wisely because I don't have access to this smokescreen as much anymore. Obviously, I was shitting bricks here when the Yukon with massive, Royal Navy HE powers coming around at this close. I'm going to have to utilize the rest of my smokescreen to try to reverse my ass behind this island, and hopefully my allies will come and bail me out here because I don't think I'm going to be able to kill this Yukon, as he does indeed have a super keel on a Monarch hull down at tier 7. Kind of an underplayed battleship in my opinion. That's not that bad. Yes, the guns are, leave a lot to be desired, but it's still a pretty damn strong ship. But I'm going to see if I can time it right so that this guy could potentially fire his main battery at my ally Eagle, and then I'm going to go flying around him because I know his turret traverse is pretty slow, and see if I can catch him with his pants down with my torpedoes. That's kind of my main theory here, and then I saw his shells go off, so now I'm going to make my maneuver. It would be a little bit easier if I had my speed boost up and active, but I don't have that essentially, or sadly, so I'm going to have to try to make the best of what I got. So, obviously you saw what I did to that Fen Yang, or that ship smasher. The semi-armor piercing is absolutely no joke, guys. With the amount of damage you're going to be able to do in a short burst period of time, only 3.2 seconds on this ship, with your adrenaline rush, now especially procced, probably getting me, what, 10% better reload DPM? I'm not 100% sure on the, what it would be at. Yeah, it's crazy, right? It's very, very crazy. Here we go. We hit all 4 torpedoes, bring them down, and then our semi-armor piercing finishes off for a devastating strike. I mean, again, the ship coupled with, if you're able to land your torpedoes, is incredibly scary. So you want to make sure that you pick your situations, your engagements, when you're playing this ship. That is like my biggest advice I could give you. And definitely have better time management on your smoke screen. That was another big one I have to give you. So you could see the damage we're able to dish out now with these 137s is night and day compared to the 127s you had on the Hughes prior. The Hughes does have an additional torpedo launcher, which again is kind of giving you you're dipping your toe in cold water to see where it's at with this line, but now you're full-fledged gunboat. You're in it to win it. You're invested in the guns completely. This is why you've gone down this line for that chunking, farming ability and damage that this line does bring, which again is crazy. I think it's different from a lot of lines out there that rely more so on fires and setting fires and being harassers to being full-fledged, DD killers. I think it's a happy medium between the two, because your DD killers usually have your radar, have tools, even your hydroacoustic search to contest caps. This doesn't really have that. Its best advantage is that it has a smoke screen on demand, and that is huge. That is a big, big pro to this ship. And if you know how to manage your smokescreen and put yourself in good positions to utilize it, these ships are incredibly strong, and enemy DDs should be aware. Obviously, we have hardly any HP left. Sadly, we only have about 2,500, and there's a Shiratsuyu out here. I'm going to do my best to see if I can eliminate him. We do end up detecting one another, but he's actually not a stupid Japanese commander, and he actually does fire his guns, which he ends up killing me, but I am about 1 shell hit away from killing him, so I bring him down to like 700 HP. Again, though, I gave the Fuso potentially and my allies enough time to maybe spot him, and then now my aircraft carrier knows where he's at theoretically. But again, I look back at this clip and I go, if I didn't alter course and I just soaked it, basically bought into knowing that I couldn't survive this engagement, that this was a one-way ticket, I think I would have actually killed this guy. You're going to see right there, if I wasn't turning, if I wasn't starting my turn and I still had my rear turrets to bear, I think that one more shell hit would have hit, we would have killed them. So, but yeah, here's the end of the game. Not a bad result, guys. 152,000 damage. I think we finished first on base XP earned. A very, very strong ship. And I can't recommend her enough. And I think she's a big, big jump in the line for power from the Hughes to the tier 8. So let's go into the port screen, and I'll go ahead and give you my final thoughts on the Osborne, guys. Alrighty, so here we're back in port here, and I'm going to give you my final thoughts on the ship. Disregard the commander in the top right. That's just another commander I sauced on here for trying an alternative build, which did not work. That's why I did not recommend it. My final thoughts on the Osborne, guys, is like I said, to finish off the gameplay review of the ship, is that she's an incredibly strong ship, and I had a blast in her, and I find myself going back to this ship a lot. I get consistently good results in this ship, and hopefully the things that I told you are highlighted in this video you really take to heart and write home, and I think you'll go ahead and get good results in her too. She's not incredibly hard to get good results in because semi-armor piercing in this game is just so incredibly strong, and especially on a DD platform, when you have a concealment good enough to engage and catch other DDs off guard, you really can shred through their HP pool relatively quick, right? My final thoughts on her are this, guys. One, time management on your smoke screen. I think if you can manage your smoke screen, you're really going to be able to have, get a leg above your enemies. You don't just rip through all 2 minutes and whatever seconds on your smoke in the beginning of the battle like I did, but sadly, scenario presented itself. I had to utilize it, sadly, for survival. Who knows? I could have died if I didn't do it, right? Manage your smoke screen so that it can last you throughout the game, so that when you really need that smoke, you have it on your demand. And again, you have it on demand. I think you only have like a 15 or 10-second cooldown. That mandatory smoke you have to utilize. So you can go ahead and press the T key to turn it off and save your smoke till next time, right? Which is super nice. I think the Hughes had potentially a 20, or was it 15 as well? Don't really remember right now, as we've moved on to a different video, and that was 6 days ago. Another thing on this ship is understanding that when to utilize semi-armor piercing and HE. I'd say 90% of the time you're probably going to use semi-armor piercing. It's the superior ammunition choice in almost all your engagements. The HE you saw when I utilized it on the Nagato, coming nose into me so I could set some fires, which 8% is not that bad, and that's standard. That's without signal flags. If you want to take the signal flags, you bump it up to 9. I don't really recommend Demo Expert. I think it would be a waste of 2 points just because you're using semi-armor piercing the vast majority of the time. So I'm not all about investing in something that I'm only going to use maybe 10% of the time, right? I think the fire chance is more than sufficient enough to get the job done. And the other time I would utilize it is if I want to finish up a target, or if it's a DD, just nose in on me and I want to get some full pens on them on the nose. That's when I'm going to go ahead and do that, right? To those finishing volleys and shots. And the last thing is just make sure you position yourself and you're constantly moving. Even in your smoke screen, you want to be moving. Quarter speed, half speed, whatever it is, utilizing islands and coverage. You don't want to eat a random pedo. If you eat a random pedo in this game, you're going to be, lower than half HP, depending on the nation that you take it from, potentially even dead, right? You don't want to do that because it's really going to severely handicap your game, and especially as a gunboat, it's even more damaging if you eat those torpedoes. So make sure you're moving, staying mobile in your smoke screen. And even with your smoke, you still have to be supplying vision to your team. It is one of your main jobs as a destroyer, is giving vision to your team. Even with this smoke screen and a farmer, I cannot stand the amount of times or tell you the amount of times that I've seen DDs, this line included, that just because they're a gunboat, they smoke up, but they were the only ones spotting, and now they can't physically shoot anyone or see anyone. Don't be that guy. There's a time and a place to do so, to disengage. If someone else is spotting and you are 100% positive that, then you can smoke up and aid. You are a second line support destroyer. That is how I play this ship. You definitely want to be playing it in, close to another destroyer, because you really can turn the engagement into a decisive victory in a low amount of time because of your main gun power. So that is another big thing I cannot stress enough, that if you can, especially on a flank, depending if it's a 3, 4, 5 DD heavy game, go with an enemy destroyer and do what you can. If you are finding yourself flying solo in this DD, you have to play a little bit more passive, not necessarily at the Osborne's level, but definitely more towards the Christopher and Burroughs level, because the concealment gap between when the enemy DD usually can see you and your detection, like it's still like usually a kilometer and some change, right? It's usually going to be high. So sometimes you already want to be in the pre-kited position. Sometimes you want to be, going quarter speeds. You could smoke up right away and then disengage. You have to play it smart, right? Because the last thing you want to do is go in there and then get killed or half HP in the beginning of the game, and then pretty much you're useless the rest of the game, right? You don't want to do that. So please play a little bit more on the conservative side in the beginning of the battle. Read the minimap, utilize it to the best of your advantage, and then make your decisions, and you shall be fine in this ship. And at the end of the day, don't stop clicking the left mouse button. This ship is fun. It is a gunboat through and through. Use your torpedo armament to get you out of sticky situations and complement your main battery. It is a strong ship. I don't really see these ships ever not being strong because of the firepower that these ships bring. It's on a very good platform, the Osborne, on the Fletcher class hull, down at tier 8. A blast, good HP pool, great firepower, and all in all, a very fun experience, guys. So anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you guys find this video fun and engaging, and informative, right? Stay tuned for more, and I will catch you all in the next video, guys. Have a good rest of your day, and peace out.